Thank you, everybody. I'm honored to be here today to share my story. Sex, bias, and $1 billion. Learned some lessons from that for sure. So since I'm the first speaker of the morning, I thought we'd get started with sex. Thanks so much for having me. Because that's it, right? That's everything that we think we need to know when it comes to sex. And in fact, we believe this so profoundly that when I set off to get the first ever drug approved for sexual desire in women, and it wasn't that long ago, there were 26 FDA-approved drugs for some form of male sexual dysfunction, and not a single one for women. Not a single one. So I'm going to show you that first slide a little bit of a different way. So this is the truth about sex. Sex is multifactorial. We bring a lot of things into the bedroom with us. We bring social factors, how we were raised, probably religion. We bring psychological factors, what's going on for us, what's going on in the relationship. Wait, stop there, right? When it comes to women, they're so complicated. All those knobs and dials, and oh my God. The reality is, sex is complicated. We readily accept that men bring biology into the bedroom, and I'll tell you what, so do women. So study after study after study, we know that for a certain subset of women, women who have a medical condition known as hypoactive sexual desire disorder, the most common female sexual dysfunction, with a prevalence the same as erectile dysfunction actually in men, which is men's most common dysfunction. If you put those women into an MRI, into a PET scan, you expose them to sexual cues, their brains light up totally differently. And that's what you're looking at here. So you can see in a woman with the normal ebb and flow of desire. Desire is not constant, it ebbs and flows, but the normal ebb and flow of desire, their brain lights up in response to sexual cues. It's remarkable the contrast in women who have hypoactive sexual desire disorder. And yet we weren't paying attention. So my background, I built a company with one of those 26 FDA-approved drugs for men, and I was a spectator to this science. I just flew in last night from the Sexual Medicine Society meeting. I bet you guys didn't know there was one of those. Makes me pretty popular at cocktail parties. So I just flew in for that. I was at the Sexual Medicine Society meeting in 2010, and a German company had been on the path to finally break through with a therapy for women, a therapy that worked on what we now understood scientifically was going on. But in 2010, they went to all the biggest and brightest researchers in the field who were already underway in clinical trials. They had women on the drug, and they said, you know what? We went to the FDA, we hit a roadblock, we're gonna walk away. And it was very clear to me in that moment that they were not walking away on the basis of science. The science was spectacular. They were walking away on the basis of a societal narrative about female sexuality, which brings me to my first lesson of entrepreneurship. Never accept narratives that impede progress. So I took my company with one of those successful 26 drugs for men, my profitable male business, and I sold it off to take this on. I went to all of my shareholders who'd gotten a return, and I said, give me some back, we're going again. Because this is what we need to do. So what do? I went to Germany, I got the drug from the German company, no upfront payment. If I was successful, they'd be successful in royalties. And I went into the FDA and I sat down. They'd already given them some direction, which wasn't surprising, by the way. The fact that they walked away was surprising. 80% of the time when you're going to break through with a brand new molecular entity, the FDA is going to ask you to do more work. That made a lot of sense. So we already knew what that was, but we wanted to sit down as the new company, Sprout Pharmaceuticals, and ask them what we need to do. We got a roadmap, pretty straightforward, pre-specified endpoints, double-blinded placebo-controlled trials, meet it with statistical significance. We went out to do the work. I'm very proud of the fact that we had 68 total trials in this drug and studied over 11,000 women. I'll give you a little bit of context for that. The average new drug approval in the United States is approved on just under 1,000 women. When we submitted, we were the largest ever new drug approval for women. So we did all the work, we met all the endpoints, I was getting ready, I was talking to women's groups because Lord knows people have a lot of misunderstandings when it comes to women and sex. I wanted to make sure they understood what this was, the educate, and we waited. The FDA had it under review. We'd met all the endpoints, but they denied it. That was a bad Friday. That was not a good day. I had just landed, I'd just flown in from New York. I can remember sitting at the airport, I'd gotten a text. The word had come through and I was mystified. I'd done all the work. I'd met all the endpoints. This was science. And yet we got a rejection. So I sat down in the airport, which for what felt like hours, because what was I going to tell my team? This was sort of the end of the company as we knew it. So I went into the office, told everybody the news, said I didn't have any of the answers, and that we all were going to take the day off. We were leaving early that weekend. Went home, took to the bed, cried it out a little bit, and then I went back to my inbox. And I read all the notes that women had written me, who had opened the doors for their most private struggles and shared them with me to encourage me to continue to go on so we would have our very first. And on Monday, I went into the office and I told the team that we were going to dispute the FDA. I like to call it the road less traveled. It is a path available to drug makers, but it was a bold move. And I'll tell you why I did it. Because in science, and maybe in life in general, I think things come down to this, risk-benefit, right? And it seems so objective, risk-benefit. And yet, if you assign no value to the benefit of something, then any risk would be too great. It's actually quite subjective. And what struck me is that the women who were suffering with this condition, the women who were writing me, were not at the center of the conversation at all. And benefit is in the eye of the beholder. So I think about this note from Yvette in Texas. She said, I've pretty much given up hope. My marriage is okay, my husband's a good man. If you go to the end, she says, thank you for not telling me that I am broken and I'm not fulfilling my duties. Mostly, thank you for letting me know that I'm not alone. This affects 7 to 10% of women. 1 in 10 of the women sitting in this room could be affected by this condition. So, not only did I start asking critical questions, so too did some of the most prestigious women's health and rights groups. You can see them, the National Organization for Women, Society for Women's Health Research. We can go on. And what 10 of them did is they got on a bus and they demanded a meeting with the FDA. I wish I'd been on that bus. I wasn't on the bus, but they went to the FDA and they had a conversation. And what they said is, what exactly, 26 times we've looked at a risk-benefit evaluation with a drug. And all drugs have risks. Please make no mistake. All drugs have risks. But we have felt that they are well characterized enough to hand over that decision to men and their healthcare provider. But not once have we done that for women. It's not that it hadn't been tried. So to the FDA's credit, they put women at the center of the conversation. They opened their doors to the public. We had some of the biggest public meetings ever in which the FDA invited in experts. They invited in women who suffered from the condition. The public had an opportunity to comment. And boy, what a public conversation it was. I'll tell you, my parents like to say to me, could you have not gone into diabetes? Right? Because I'll tell you what, if you are not diabetic, you have no opinion about a drug that treats it. Not really. But you know what we all have an opinion on? Sex. Because we're going to apply our own normal to somebody else. And I'll tell you, I think my parents would even have settled, and they did with my first company, Slate, if I would go into male sexual dysfunction. So even ED would be an easier road, because let's just say my little pink pill, what if it had been blue? I'll tell you the difference. I would have gotten priority review. Does anybody know what that is? So the FDA you have the ability to petition the FDA to say you meet such an important unmet medical need that you should be fast-tracked for approval. Viagra met such an important unmet medical need for men that it was priority reviewed in 6 months. I thought, I'll ask for the same, denied. They submitted safety data with 1/3 as many patients, and they were approved in 6 months. I was 6 years later in my journey. And this led me to my second lesson of entrepreneurship, which is be unapologetic in your mission. You are going to have to ask the tough questions when things just aren't adding up. And here's what I knew, that group, the very public conversation about this, many of whom have a lot of negative things to say about me, about the drug, about women and sexuality. We have a lot of deeply held beliefs there. But here's what I knew. I had over 1 million pages worth of data. 1 million. Double-blinded, placebo-controlled trials, pre-specified endpoints by the FDA. I had to hit 3 different ones in 3 large pivotal trials, 9 shots on goal. I made it every single time. So the FDA finally had a public meeting in which they invited in a panel of scientific experts to review all of our data and make a recommendation to them. Overwhelmingly, they voted to approve the drug. Science won, but really, women did too in that moment. So, I went 2 ahead. Hold on, I gotta go back. Dang, I don't know that this is gonna play. So this little company who could, my company based in Raleigh, North Carolina, had done what no big company could do. And I will say that I gave it away. I did maybe spit my drink out the moment that Jimmy Kimmel called us Magic Mike in a bottle. I didn't see that one coming. And neither did anyone of my little group, a company that could entirely fit in an elevator. We might have been a freight elevator by the end, but this little group of people had put their blood, sweat, and tears explicitly into changing the conversation for women and sex. The New York Times called us one of the most intriguing new pharmaceuticals in a generation. In 2 days after we got the drug approved, we sold the company for $1 billion. We sold it so that it could be marched across the globe. It could be made broadly, affordably accessible to women. It was, right, for all intents and purposes, the dream come true, which is my third lesson in entrepreneurship. You've got to embrace the workhorse to become the unicorn. We didn't set out to create the next $1 billion drug. We set out to give women a choice. I think I'm sick of all of the valley speak, the declaration of greatness before there's execution, the wish of walking in. I get pitched all the time, I'm the next unicorn. What I care more about is, are you going to put your head down and do the work? And from that outcome, I'm very privileged today to now invest in other women, health tech by or for women. What I knew is I'd had a lesson, really at the hands of some of the greats in advocacy, of what it really means to advocate. I'd witnessed an unfairness, I'd witnessed what happens when you speak up about it, and I looked at my own story. I think if Scott had said, next up, I have a pharmaceutical CEO who sold their last business for $1 billion. You did not expect me to come onto this stage. And that was, can you imagine? As I was out raising money in hot pink in a room full of blue and gray for a drug for women and sex. The path wasn't straight for me, for sure. And what I knew is my own story. 2% of venture capital goes to women. So we really think that half the population has 2% of the good ideas? Ridiculous. So today I take my outcome and invest in other women. I'm thrilled to have a incubator in Raleigh, North Carolina. And it's breakthrough first. It's companies that'll change social conversations. I love them all. I'll pick 3. Leah Diagnostics, who's about to launch the first flushable pregnancy test in the world. It's not your mother's pregnancy test. It's environmentally conscious. It is cognizant of the fact that not all women want to have their pregnancy test sitting on top of the wastebasket. Medolac, which has human breast milk, completely sterile, that can go to a NICU and save the life of a premature baby. undercover colors, which a drop of liquid, I can stick my finger in a drink, touch a decal, and it will tell me if there is a date rape drug in the drink. An epidemic on college campuses. So very proud of those 9 companies, and then lo and behold, this year we added a 10th. I'll fast forward one, Sprout. So the company that I sold for $1 billion wasn't exactly the story I expected. It got put on the shelf. The company that bought it, because of an extraordinary circumstance they went through, never launched the drug. And so I'd written a contract in which there were really specific performance obligations. They had to put the effort toward education. This was my baby. They had to raise it in the world the way that I imagined. When they didn't, I had a window to go back. So I sued them. And this year they gave me the drug back for nothing. And I'm delighted to say that we have, that's that slide. I got the drug back for nothing. And I'm delighted to say that just months ago we launched it. And actually, if you go home today on the subway, you may see some ads. The platform, HERS, which is a national telemedicine platform that launched last week, put it on their platform. And I keep getting texts from all my friends in New York City seeing their ads everywhere. So they went out with Addyi as one of their products. So be on the lookout for it. There's finally going to be, I think, the kind of effort behind it that women do deserve. So I'll just review those 3. Do not accept narratives that impede progress. Be unapologetic in your mission. Embrace the workhorse to become the unicorn. And I'll leave you with my 4th, and it's oh so simple. It's your story, so it's up to you to create the happy ending. Sex, bias, and $1 billion. Thanks so much. I appreciate it. I'd love to take your questions.
Any questions for Cindy? If anyone want to kick us off? Yeah, so we have a few in the
You can say
middle.
Asking for a friend. I'm used to it.
Oh, yeah. Okay, any type of question is totally on point. So let's, yes.
Have you considered expanding beyond health tech for your incubator, or are you going to stick to that for now?
We look at, I think just because there are so few of us really focused in this particular area, we look at all ideas. And at a minimum, I think if it's investable, I have a great network of other women who are really with this same sort of mandate and pass them on to others if they're not a fit for us. We just want to invest in those in which we can be most helpful.
Great. Let's take a question from my left side here.
Hey, so you talk about the risks associated with disputing the FDA. What were those risks?
Say that one more time.
I said you talked about the risks with disputing the FDA. What were those risks?
The risks, I guess, versus the benefits. Yeah. You had to fight.
So I think it was about the drug. All drugs. So the imperative of a pharmaceutical company is that I must, with great rigor, characterize the benefits and the risks. So I do not only large-scale intend-to-treat populations of pivotal trials, but I do all sorts of studies that are challenge studies, high dosing, in extreme circumstances. And what I feel very strongly is that it is our obligation to do that. It is the FDA's obligation that if there are any showstoppers, they don't go forward. However, if there are not, it is actually our duty to hand it over for the decision to be made by the patient and their provider. It's patient choice, ultimately. And you see that this becomes a storyline often in stigmatized conditions. I think about, for example, the drugs for AIDS, HIV medications in the beginning. These are drugs that have some real risk to the patients who take it. And there became a very public conversations with the patients saying, don't hold them back from me. I'm picking. I would be willing to take that risk to have the possibility of that benefit. And that's really what we were up against. We have to be very careful that we don't exert our own opinion on whether or not a patient deserves that choice.
Because that's where the biases, I guess, can come in.
Yep.
One last question before we wrap up here. Do we have a mic in the middle here? Oh, here, it's right next to you, though. Go ahead.
So if you, as a geeky man, I don't really understand why men didn't want this solved, but leaving that aside, it seems like you change the bias. Did you change the bias? Did you change minds, or did you just wear them down? That seems to be the secret sauce here. If you changed minds.
You know, I think that I think data is informed differently through the lens of empathy. And what I think, you know, is we have to be especially careful of this as the world goes to spreadsheets and everything else. I think it's so important. It was incredible to me that we weren't talking to the women living with it. And it's so easy, you know, sex is, we talk about it as the punchline. It's the easy way to talk about it. And I think when I got into this, even the criticism of me was, nobody's gonna lose their life from this. What are you doing? And I said, go talk to the women living with it because they're losing their life as they know it. And I think, again, to the credit of the FDA, when they swung the doors open and they let all women come in and they let there be public comment and everything else, they really started to appreciate what that benefit side of the scale looked like and what the impact would be on their life. And it was, you know, we even in our data, the mean, we looked at satisfying sexual events and so much conversation about how much is enough. My answer is that woman gets to choose.
Great. One more round of a hand for Cindy.
Thank you.